Hello! Today's stories come from r/best of Redditor updates. We have two longer but hilarious stories today under r/best of updates. They come from r/AskAManager and were reported by a very follow-worthy Redditor, JB Reddit account. Our first story is Ornithophobe panics at bird, shoves coworker at moving vehicle, she's badly injured, and demands his firing. Plus updates. I'm a manager. I'm having an issue with two of my staff, Liz and Jack. They were returning from an offsite meeting and had parked in front of our building. According to Liz and other witnesses, there was a bird on the sidewalk, and when it flew away, Jack ran. Liz was less than a step ahead of him, and he pushed her out of the way when he was running. Liz fell off the curb and got hit by a car that was parking. She ended up covered in bruises and breaking both bones in one forearm. Liz had to be taken to the hospital in an ambulance. The breaks were in the middle of her forearm and were so bad that Liz had surgery on her arm the next day and required a total hospital stay of 4 days. Jack didn't try to help Liz after it happened. He stood far away and came into our building as soon as the ambulance arrived. Jack told me, my boss, and HR, he has a phobia of birds, and later produced a letter from his therapist stating he has been in therapy and treatment for ornithophobia and anxiety for over 2 years. He explained it was why he tried to run from the bird and said he didn't help Liz after she got hit because the bird landed on the ground close to her. Understandably, Liz is angry. She wants Jack to be fired. HR was wary of firing Jack when he has had no previous trouble and has a phobia and mental illness that rise to the level of needing treatment. And so am I. When Liz found out that Jack wasn't going to be fired, she quit. Liz was working on a few projects, and without her, there could be delays and extra costs incurred. We have tried to get her to come back, but she refuses unless Jack is fired. Jack called her with HR present to apologize, but she didn't accept and yelled at him. With Jack's permission, his phobia and mental health issues were explained to Liz, but she says she doesn't care. What should I do? I don't feel comfortable firing Jack or recommending it given what he disclosed. I'm not sure where to go from here. Update 1. There was a police investigation because Liz was injured by a vehicle. Both the police and the driver's insurance company found Jack to be 100% at fault for what happened, based on multiple witness accounts that Jack had extended his arms back and then out when he pushed Liz and didn't just lightly bump into her. Liz agreed it was Jack's fault and not the driver. One of the mirrors on the vehicle was damaged when Liz was hit, and Jack paid to have it repaired as a resolution with the driver. And everything between the driver and Jack had been settled. Jack has not been charged with anything. It is still a possibility that he might be. HR and Jack had attempted to keep in contact with Liz after she got out of the hospital to see if there was any chance of her coming back, but she never responded. Eventually, both Jack and the company received a letter from a lawyer asking that they not contact Liz again. She never asked for money to pay her medical bills, didn't file a workers' comp claim, and didn't take any legal action against Jack. The legal department and outside legal counsel, who HR got a second opinion from, had told Jack and the company to prepare for a claim and other legal action, and advised all to settle because Liz had a strong case. Her letter stated she had decided to not take action and just wanted to move on for her own well-being. She now has another job. Our company was not contacted for a reference or employment history. I don't know if Liz told them what happened during the interview, but our industry in this area is small, and I know for sure she has now told her new job everything that happened. After what happened, Jack told me he decided to take a break from therapy and look at his options. I was surprised, and he volunteered that information without me asking. But since I am in a management position over him, I didn't think it was appropriate for me to comment or tell him that. His work is still excellent, and he has had no disciplinary or work-related issues. Update 2. Liz is still at her new job and has not attempted contact, legal, or financial compensation with Jack or the company we work for, either herself or through a lawyer or anyone else. Word about what happened and the aftermath has gotten around the industry a little. I have been asked about it by a few people I know from other places. I just tell them I have nothing to say and they stop asking. Jack is still working here. He has not re-entered therapy or isn't undergoing any kind of treatment. Thank you again for your assistance here. Happy holidays to you and your loved ones. Edit. Thank you to you/Shoddy Witness for finding this post by OP in the AAM AskAManager comments. Liz did not demand that Jack be fired. She quit, and when HR wanted to know what it would take for her to come back, she said firing Jack. This was right after her surgery before she was discharged. HR declined, so Liz said she would not return. She only told HR she wanted him fired because they asked first. I had no input or say in the company or Jack calling Liz at home. There was no checking in or asking how she was. They did want to convince her to come back, and that was it. At no point did the company offer Liz financial assistance. According to her lawyer, she is on a 5-year payment plan with the hospital and rehab center for her bills. Yikes. It's one thing to hit someone as you're running by, trying to get out of the way, escape a crazy bird that's obviously going to dive at you and poke out your eyes. But it's quite another to full on shove them off the sidewalk onto the road in front of a parking vehicle. My goodness. And I don't mean to make light of phobias. I just don't understand in what world a fear of anything is a justification for pushing someone in front of a moving vehicle. I thought this story was a little odd. Let's check out some fairly scathing comments directed at both Jack and OP from Redditors. Dice Lotus said, "The fact that Liz had a lawyer send a cease and desist against HR and Jack makes me think they weren't just keeping in contact, but harassing her." Toots NYC said, "And the company is trying to see if she'll return, not, how are you?" Mad Peachy Pie added, "Oh, and thank God they settled the issue of the mirror." Seriously aggravated added, "Right? The mirror is merely an afterthought. That actually irritated me. Glad he made sure to accept financial responsibility for a piece of plastic and glass." Last of the Time Lady said, "If I panicked from a phobia and physically pushed my coworker into getting hit by a car and landing in the hospital, my guilt would drive me to my wits' end. I'd quit my job to make them more comfortable, pay their bills, and be servant at their sick bed. I'd mow their lawn, walk their dog, clean their gutters, and write holiday cards to their distant relatives for the rest of their living days. I'd be setting aside a fund for their grandchildren's college education." Jack's cool lack of remorse is unrelatable, verging on unsettling. Blue XY said, "OP is an awful manager, and Liz should have sued the frack out of that company. Imagine learning one of your coworkers almost died due to the actions of another and deciding to protect the one that caused the harm. As awful as it might be that Jack had a genuine fear, it is also their own personal responsibility to not kill anyone else due to that fear. And if they aren't able to do that, they're a danger to themselves and society to a degree that they need significant help. No employer would be expected to defend or protect someone who pushed another coworker in front of a car, regardless of the justification." Off Kira added, "Well, we have this doctor's note saying Jack has a legit fear of birds, so who cares if he shoves someone because of his fear of birds that the coworker had zero to do with?" I was really rooting for a massive lawsuit. It was completely deserved and seems like it would have been an easy payday. Our second story is as outrageous as the first. A hardboiled detective saga as OP is in a race against time to discover who keeps farting up their high powered business deal. I work in upper middle management at a large business and entertainment events company, and recently we got back to regular face to face client meetings. Over the last few weeks, we've been having some intense and lengthy meetings in our office with a potential local client, which could really take our company to the next level if it works out. However, a rather awkward problem has arisen. During these meetings, which tend to last all afternoon, someone breaks wind, silently, usually more than once. The odor is, frankly, overwhelming. Yet there is not much in the way of any clear reaction from anyone in the room. I have noticed some people very, very discreetly eye each other suspiciously, but it's quite a formal and stiff atmosphere with several very serious and no nonsense senior executives present from both sides. So it appears if people are just doing their best to ignore this rude interruption. During one of the wind-breaking incidents, a junior member of staff sat with her elbow on the table and put her hand over her hand and mouth, trying to make it look like she was just resting her head, while another junior member looked uncomfortable but kept her head down and stared at her notepad. On another occasion, I noticed one of the clients frowning and looking out of the corner of their eye. But frankly, I dare not catch anyone's eye, so I always quickly avert my gaze to avoid any awkwardness or, heavens forbid, suspicion. Everything at our company is businesslike, and relations are generally good. I know everyone reasonably well on our side, so I had assumed the culprit was from the would-be client's team. But imagine my horror when, After the clients had left our last meeting, leaving our team to continue the discussion among ourselves, the silent boardroom farter struck again. I was incredulous. There were 3 senior male executives in the room and 2 junior female members of staff who were not always present at other meetings. So I am fairly certain the culprit is a senior management figure at our firm. I'm completely at a loss as to how to deal with this. I'm quite ambitious and have invested a lot of energy into making this project happen. So I can't believe that a senior company member is behaving in such a rude manner and potentially jeopardizing it by acting so unprofessionally towards potential partners. The potential clients cannot have possibly failed to notice the smell, and I can only assume they are simply being polite and professional by ignoring it. However, I am just afraid that there are limits to anyone's tolerance and that sooner rather than later, they will decide one way or another to end their interest in working with us. This is just such a strange problem. How on earth can I voice my concerns to my superiors? Update 1. Thought I would give an update on the farting in the boardroom story of a little while back, as the issue did not go away and things turned out a lot differently than how I expected. So there were another 4 to 5 meetings. The farting continued. In some meetings, it was worse than others. It did seem that those scheduled in the morning were less gassy affairs, although by no means did attendees enjoy fresh air for the entire duration of those. Despite the regular bouts of nostril burning flatulence wafting throughout the room, it became clear we were going to be working with this client on a long term basis, and the atmosphere grew a little more relaxed accordingly. On one occasion, near the end of a meeting, someone cracked a very funny joke, which provoked an outburst of communal laughter, during which someone, presumably involuntarily, let out an audible fart. It was short, not very loud, and if anyone noticed it, they didn't let on. However, whilst I couldn't be sure if everyone heard it, it was certainly smelt by everyone. The eye-wateringly foul stench wiped the smiles off some faces and replaced the amused expressions of a few others with frowns. This seemingly brought this particular meeting to a slightly premature end, as the most senior member of the client team rose to his feet and said without a hint of irony, "Well, that's probably as good a note as any to end on for today." It was unclear if he was referring to the funny joke cracked moments earlier or the fart. Indeed, he seemed a very sharp individual who probably realized it was a perfect moment for ambiguity. But I have to admit, the sight of everyone's eyes darting around the room as people tried to gauge each other's reactions to try and figure out exactly what he meant was an amusing one. But not as amusing as moments later, watching senior management leaning over the table exchanging farewell platitudes and shaking hands, whilst yet another stinking fart assaulted everyone's noses. It got to the point where people let their guard down a bit and became a little less restrained in hiding their reactions. An electric fan mysteriously appeared in the corner of meeting room one day, but it wasn't used for the first meeting it appeared in, probably as it was an early morning affair with limited silent and deadly emissions. But during one particularly gassy afternoon episode a week later, one of the clients, a younger female, was sat with the corners of her mouth pointing downwards and using a piece of A4 to fan the air, trying to make it look like she was just trying to cool her face. Our director saw this and asked the junior member sitting nearest the new fan to switch it on, please. Seems it's getting a little hot in here, with a completely straight face. On the fan went, but the speed was set on a higher speed than anticipated, and all that happened was pieces of paper, meeting notes, and a newspaper were blown off the table and flew around the room, along with the familiar pungent stench. Thankfully, this was laughed off, and I took advantage of the interruption to suggest a break. As we left the office, juniors to clear up the chaos. During the unplanned interval, I noticed our most senior executive had hung back to help reorganize the room. This was most out of character, but it turned out he just wanted to get the newspaper, which had been blown inside out. Seconds later, he emerged from the room and walked towards the gaggle of us who were drinking coffee and chatting in the open plan area outside the meeting room. He radiated a beaming smile as he strode right past everyone in the direction of the men's restroom, with the newspaper tucked under his arm. Seeing that he didn't return to the meeting room for a good 10 minutes after everyone else had, it didn't take Sherlock Holmes to deduce why he had been so eager to get his hands on some reading material. This brazen and unashamed approach to bathroom business quickly led me to place him in the #1 position on the silent boardroom farter suspect list. I also especially noted there were no more silent but deadly interruptions for the remainder of that meeting, which went on for a further 3 hours or so. During our very last meeting, which was to seal the deal, there was an awkward culture clash. We work in a multinational office in a major Asian city. English is the working language, and between us and the client team, everyone speaks English fluently. But there is a varying mix of comprehension of our host country's language. All of our senior executives are Westerners and unable to converse in the local language. I'm not a local, but I'm fluent in the local lingo. During the meeting, two maintenance men wearing overalls entered the room and announced they were responding to a report of a fault in the ventilation system. But both the workers were not fluent in English, so I did some on the spot interpretation, to which our most senior executive replied, "Please tell the janitors the aircon and ventilation system are working fine. We have important business to conclude today." I duly interpreted. But the workman, not at all concerned with the subtleties of boardroom etiquette, bluntly replied in the local vernacular, "There's no ventilation problem? It smells like butt in here," which basically caused the half of the room who could understand to laugh and the other half to respond with smiles and looks of curiosity as to what exactly was said. Thinking on my feet, I didn't translate anything back to my side, but urged the maintenance guys to come back in a few hours because it was a really important meeting and we really had to get on with it. It was a ruse which seemed to impress the client executive, who was also fluent in that language, and offered my side a way to continue without drawing more attention to the constant bad smells than was necessary. The deal ended up being signed off, and it was decided both teams would go out for dinner and drinks to celebrate. Sure enough, the drinks flowed, and both sides let their hair down as the night drew on. Whilst chatting with one of the clients, someone of similar level to myself, and with a few drinks in me, I couldn't help but bring up the farting issue. The client replied, "Oh, that was our boss. We're so sorry about that. He's a great guy, but sits there in our office telling ding dong and fart jokes all day. He says it's an example of thinking out of the box to make our team more relaxed, comfortable with each other." So after each meeting, we were telling him to quit passing gas. He would deny it each time, but the whole thing had just become a running joke for our team, so we just rolled with it. Sorry. Very surprised by this revelation, and at the level of humor coming from such an otherwise professional and serious team, I felt it best to just laugh it off and not reveal the real source of the reek. But emboldened by this, days later, I ran into our senior executive's personal assistant, who was usually in the meetings, and asked her straight up if the guy had a wind problem. "Oh, yeah," she replied. "I'm glad my desk is outside. He just sits and farts in his office room all day and just doesn't care." I ended up feeling like I was the one who had the problem all along. A keener sense of smell than most, not especially amused by fart jokes, and a little naive. Seniority level and attitude to public farting are not necessarily linked. Some interesting comments from AskAManager discussing the reveal. 1. So there were two farters? 2. Fart twist? 3. A Shyamalan worthy twist indeed. 4. Wait, I thought that the OP senior executive was the farter, but the client's team assumed that their boss was the farter because he tells fart jokes all day as some sort of management technique, which is a whole other world of hurt. So the client's team's boss is being falsely accused of being the farter. 5. Rereading it, you could be totally right. OP says, "I felt it best to just laugh it off and not reveal the real source of the reek." So she probably shares your interpretation. On the other hand, the client seemed very sure of themselves, and the fact that boss denied it doesn't really mean anything. Or does it? Would someone like that simply be delighted in speaking of his farting endeavors after the fact? I see this whole thing remains mysterious. 6. The client team probably assumed he didn't want to admit to farting in an important meeting, and they just didn't believe him because he'd cried fart too many times before. So the OP was mortified about her boss farting, but it turns out the client thought it was coming from their side. This is insane. 7. What are the chances both bosses were in on it and having a fart battle to the death? 8. Honestly, I think it had to be both of them. I wouldn't be surprised if they emboldened each other even if they weren't feeling competitive about it. But I am sympathetic to the OP. I would be completely unamused and grossed out by this entire situation. 9. That's the impression I got. OP knew it was their exec, but the client assumed it was theirs. 10. This. OP's exec has a wind problem, but the client's team isn't upset by it because they think it's their boss doing it, and fart jokes are a thing for them. So his denial just makes him seem more culpable, which is all a hilarious coincidence. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. Okay, let's check out the funniest comments from Reddit since we already had the serious ones reposted by JB. Spaceless Worm said, This was still more work than gets done normally in any office. Someone else replied, the CEO who cried toot. Someone else said, there was a second farter on the grassy knoll. Someone said, I had a hard time following this crap. Someone else replied, you could tell he was very excited to write the update after the initial popularity, as he snuck in a lot of the tired writing style you see on Reddit when way too many words and effusive specific subjects. They went on to quote, it did seem that those scheduled in the morning were less gassy affairs, although by no means did attendees enjoy fresh air for the entire duration of those, despite the regular bouts of nostril-burning flatulence wafting throughout the room. Brontu Typo replied, just say artsy fartsy. If you've enjoyed the story and would like to hear more, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and bye for now.